If you destroy the business model of Facebook, if you destroy the business model of Google, if you destroy the business model of all of these commercial and government methods of abusing people at a global scale, right, for personal privatized benefit, if you make that impossible, you will be not just rewarded, you will be applauded in a way that I think will be truly historic.
You don't do the kind of things that I did if you're a pessimist. You do them because you're an idealist. You believe that things can get better. You believe that we can do better. When I came forward, it was in recognition of the fact that there is a two-tiered system to the way American society is ordered today. There are those in power who operate largely behind a veil of secrecy. And even this applies even to people who aren't working for the NSA, right? This happens to congressmen. It's very difficult to find out who they're meeting with. It's very difficult to figure out, what lobbyists are having conversations with who, and what laws are being shaped, and what text is being written that is passed into law that impacts all of our lives, but was corporately sponsored, right? And these people are getting donations to their campaign, or famously, the justice system. If you're a young person from a minority community with limited access to wealth and especially education, you're going to be treated very harshly by our court system. But if you're one of these made men, working on a high level, you will face a very different flavor of justice, shall we say, or no justice at all. But that will never change unless we make it change, right? Power admits nothing without a demand. Government is not going to reform itself. And the only way that things get better anywhere is through sacrifice. We've known this since we crawled out of the swamp of history. If you want to stay warm, somebody is going to have to go through the trouble of building a house. It's not going to be fun. They're not going to love it, but they're going to be doing it because it makes life better. Somebody out there is going to have to do the hard work of growing the food that we all, survive on. And they don't get a lot of thanks for that, but society is a team sport. Our society as exists today is flawed. I recognize that, right? I am doing what I can to make it better as I can. I don't have any illusions that I'm going to fix it. I'm not going to save the world. That's not how this works. And I think this is why I can be very much at peace with the choices that I've made. And unfortunately, the price that I've paid as a result of that, because it was the right thing to do. And it has made things better. Even if it hasn't fixed the problem, people now can understand these things. We can begin to argue for better policies. And in fact, they're already happening. Our courts, which for literally decades excused themselves at all from weighing in on the legality and constitutionality of surveillance in the context of national security, have since 2013, when I came forward, ruled repeatedly on these programs and repeatedly ruled against the government that they had backstopped these things fully for, again, for a very, very long time. Some of these programs have been halted. Section 215 of the Patriot Act is no more. This was ended by an act of Congress, and also at the urging of no less than Barack Obama, who at the very beginning of 2014, interesting in terms of timing, after the very first court to rule against these programs said it was likely unlawful and unconstitutional, came out in his State of the Union speech and said, although he could never condone what I did, he felt that this conversation about surveillance, its legalities, its limits, had made us stronger as a nation. And he urged Congress to pass what was then called the USA Freedom Act to basically put new legal restraints on this. But as you say, that didn't end the problem of mass surveillance. That just pushed the tube of toothpaste right now. The toothpaste is in a slightly different part of the same tube. However, mass surveillance occurs largely through certain technical principles, certain vulnerabilities mechanically in the way our communications move from your phone or the laptop on your desk across the internet to whoever it is you're trying to communicate with, right? Whether we're talking about a website, whether we're talking about someone that you're talking to on the phone. Now, fewer and fewer people use plain voice. Fewer people use plain SMS. Now they're using encrypted messengers like the Signal Messenger or WhatsApp, which I would not trust myself for a long period of time because it was bought by Facebook. But WhatsApp was the world's most popular messenger. It had 1 billion users, and post 2013, they adopted a new technical protection called end-to-end encryption, which is intentionally designed to limit precisely the kind of mass surveillance that was being discussed in 2013. So now, at the flip of a switch, 1 billion people get a greater level of privacy that is not reliant on jurisdiction, it's not reliant on law, it's not reliant on politics. Encryption does work. One of the lessons as a result of 2013, all these disclosures about how the NSA works, how the surveillance works, you can be sneaky in a lot of ways as the NSA, as the CIA, when you're trying to steal a secret. But encryption is basically just math. And there is no, currently, with the best knowledge that we have of mathematics, any sneaky way to just make encryption go away entirely from a point of interception, right? So as, again, your phone tries to reach this other person, wherever they are in the world, it has to go through the network of many other people, through the Starbucks that you're sitting at, through their internet service provider, through a data center, through a transatlantic cable that goes to, for example, France, their data center, their local internet service provider, their Starbucks that they're sitting in. Any one of these points, anybody sitting on that line can snatch a copy of the conversation, and if it wasn't encrypted, they can read it, whether it's a criminal hacker next to you at the cafe, or whether it is a national government, be that the American government or the French government or anybody in between. The only way really to get around strong encryption that is properly implemented is precisely what the purpose of the 2013 stories was to achieve, which is to make governments shift from mass, indiscriminate collection of communications to specific, individualized, targeted collection. This means hacking, right? So imagine for a second, you send this encrypted communication to the person that you're talking to. People in the middle, tons of them, they all catch it, they all collect it, but none of them can read it because an encrypted message cannot be unlocked without a mathematical key. It's just the answer to the math problem that you make up that you share with the other person on the other side. You guys know the answer, but nobody else in the world can come up with it, right? Mass surveillance no longer works. Game over, finish, doesn't work quite that way. There's some more technical ways. We can talk about metadata later if you're interested, but it's more in depth. But the bottom line is, how then, if you're the CIA, and for example, this is not someone harmless in a Starbucks, this is an actual terrorist or spy, or a dissident in a place like Bahrain or Oman or Hong Kong, which unfortunately is all too real and happens every day. How do they read this message? And the answer is they steal a copy of the key. Instead of catching it as it goes across the line, which they can no longer do. They can't do this for everybody en masse around the world. They have to target the two places in the world that message is readable, where it's unencrypted. And that's on your device and the device of the person that you're talking with. Now, instead of dealing with encryption, instead of dealing with that global network, that easy, cheap mass surveillance, they do the hard work, the traditional targeted investigative work of hacking that phone or selling that person an implanted phone that's got spy devices built into it, basically. And then when that person is encrypting messages or when they're receiving messages and decrypting them, because they have taken over the phone, the encryption no longer matters to them because they can see it with unencrypted. They can steal that encryption key, that answer to the math problem, when it exists on the phone before it's forgotten, before it disappears. Encryption, end-to-end encryption, which is to say properly implemented encryption that doesn't have a man in the middle, doesn't have some Facebook, some Google who's keeping their own copy of the key, but encryption where the keys are only held by the communicants, by the people who are supposed to know this information. That defeats mass surveillance in the general sense that we understood in 2013. It does not prevent all surveillance. It does not prevent particularly legitimate targeted surveillance. but it returns the intelligence and law enforcement world to the more traditional means of investigation, which have fewer implications for our rights, large as a society.